Good morning and welcome everyone to this DJI virtual event, Drones and Disasters, Preparing for Wildfires in 2021 and Beyond. I'm Wayne Baker, the Director of Public Safety Integration for DJI, and I'm excited about today's event for several reasons. First, as a former fire chief and a 26-year veteran of the fire service, I know how hard it is to do this job in regular times. Yet today we're not living in ordinary times. 2020 not only brought a global pandemic, but also one of the most difficult wildfire seasons around the world as well, from Australia to the Chernobyl exclusion zone, and finally our nation as well. Resources were stretched to the brink. Communities were threatened like never before, and millions of acres were destroyed at historic rates. Through it all, I've talked to countless fire agencies across the country during this year's record-breaking fire season. To a person, they were talking about how they were tested, yet how proud they were of their work and the lives and communities saved. They face challenges of a magnitude we haven't experienced before, and we owe them our gratitude. So today, I'm excited to hear their stories. I'm also excited to hear about the role drones are playing in this effort. Over the past few years, we've seen drone technology take on an increasingly important role in the everyday routine of first responders. This year, we saw new successes and new challenges for UAV technology in wildfire mitigation and response, not all of which were generated on the ground. I look forward to hearing from our three experts to discuss their experiences during this past season and what we should focus on for 2021. So let me turn it over to our moderator, Jenny Rosenberg, the Executive Director of the Alliance for Drone Innovation, to pilot the conversation today. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Wayne, for the warm introduction. I am thrilled to be here to moderate this important discussion on drones and disasters, preparing for wildfires in 2021 and beyond. Today, our discussion is going to focus on the following topics: the critical role drones play in wildfires, how current and proposed policies and procedures affected the use of drones in the 2020 wildfire season, and what can be done in the months ahead to ensure that drones can be used to their full potential next year. Our conversation today will be followed by a brief audience Q&A session. If you would like to submit a question at any time during this event, please use the Q&A box located on the GoToWebinar control panel. First, I'd like to welcome our three expert panelists who will share their insights and firsthand perspectives from this record-setting 2020 wildfire season. First, let me introduce Chief Todd Mcneil. Chief Mcneil is the fire chief of the City of Dixon Fire Department in Solano County, California. With 27 years of service, Chief Mcneil has a diverse background in wildland and structural fire management and suppression, and has been serving as a division group supervisor operations section chief on the Federal Incident Management Team for 14 out of the last 15 years. Next is Captain Ryan Gifford. Captain Gifford is the UAV program manager at Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District and serves as the Sacramento Regional UAV Operators Group Coordinator. Captain Gifford has been in the fire service for nearly 20 years and is also a paramedic, a member of the Metro Fire Hazmat Team, as well as an operational safety officer and a medical specialist on FEMA's CATF-7 USAR team in Sacramento. And third, we have Assistant Sheriff Tom Madigan. Assistant Sheriff Madigan is a dedicated 25-year veteran of law enforcement. He manages the ACSO Aviation Substation, comprised of the Small Unmanned Aerial Vehicle Systems Program, as well as the Fixed Wing and Rotorcraft Program. Welcome, gentlemen. We're so glad to have you here with us today. Let me begin this wonderful panel today with our first question, which is, Tell me where your department stood with drones at the start of 2020 and what impact have they had on your agency to date? Who'd like to take this first?
Go, Ryan.
All right, I'll start. Our Metro Fires program has been around for, I guess we're starting to come on about 5 years now. So at the beginning of 2020, really where we were sitting was in a starting a recycle phase. We had pilots who were basically timing out. Either guys were retiring or they were coming out of the program. We were adding more people to the program. Some of our equipment was starting to come to end of life in terms of needing upgrade. And so we were building into that. We're also in the process of building a full deployment vehicle. So built on a Sprinter chassis, a vehicle to be capable of carrying some of our large format aircraft, as well as a bunch of other electronics, and a deployment vehicle, stuff to go in the area and then out of area as we start to see statewide deployments and larger incidents come under that guise. So basically, as we continue to go forward, what we're seeing now is a huge stall in all that, of course, because right after the first of the year, when things started to slow down and everything went into that freeze, a lot of that stuff got, I don't want to say shelved, but it certainly got slowed down. So I think we've been slogging through, like a lot of agencies have, with trying to keep what we can up and running and find good ways to keep our people trained and get them out in the field, which has been a challenge, obviously. In a bigger sense, on the statewide circuit, we've seen that freeze as well. So the statewide development through Firescope of UAS deployment policies, procedures, best practices, training modules, and qualifications have all basically been stalled down. And we'll talk more about that later, but that is in no small part due to the pandemic, among other things. So kind of been paddling in a circle a little bit, you might say.
Who would like to follow up on that answer? Either of you?
I'll jump in. So I'm relatively new to Dixon. It's only been about 6 months now. And I came from Twain Art up in Tuolumne County, where we had built a program that was integrated into the local response mod as well as the statewide. But to answer the question specifically, here at Dixon, right now our aircraft and our aviation program resides on the law enforcement side. And one of my to-do is to migrate that over to operations on the fire side. Like Ryan said, we've had a lot of obstacles that have slowed that process down this year. For us here, in particular, it's the impact of the wildland season, not only to us directly in Solano County with incidents in our geographic region, but then supporting the statewide mutual aid system, which, as everyone here on the panel and that are listening in know, that the amount of deployments this year, the amount of hours logged by personnel was significant, and all of that causes a delay in getting programs implemented, people trained, COAs filed, you name it. So we're in that process now of, we finally have enough rain, I believe, to go ahead and look to prep for the 2021 season. My intent is for this agency, by the 2021 season, we will have migrated aviation assets and operations to be co-located between PD and fire. What we're using over on the PD side right now is the aircraft for accident scene reconstruction and surveillance of the scene for investigation, etc. So that's where we're at now. I was hoping to have it sooner, but welcome to 2020.
Right, everybody is still adjusting to 2020 and seeing how it's going to impact their 2021. I think that's fair to say. Assistant Sheriff Madigan, anything to add to this?
Sure. First of all, thank you for the opportunity for allowing us to be here today. I'm very fortunate in that my sheriff, Sheriff Ahern, through his forethought and foresight, has realized the potential of UAS technology, not just in law enforcement, but really as a public safety tool as a whole. Through our Office of Emergency Services, we started our program almost, I think it's been about 6 years now, and it continues to grow. When we first started, we didn't know what we didn't know, and we're still continuing to learn. But what we're finding as we grow the program, we have approximately 20 people that we refer to them as remote pilots that deploy UAS throughout not only our county. Our county has about 1.6 million folks, but throughout the region. So from Monterey to the Oregon border, we provide this resource as a mutual aid request, and we're finding that it's a great law enforcement tool. It's a great tool for finding missing persons. It's a great tool for crimes in progress, but it's also a wonderful tool to assist our firefighters in the very dangerous and tough missions that they face all the time. And so over the past several years, our programs has evolved, starting with supporting the firefighters at the Ghost Ship fire in Oakland, where tragically 36 people lost their lives, where we realized the flare technology was a useful tool to help locate victims, and then progressing through a series of wildland fires that have occurred over the past 4 years, and how this tool can really bring to bear a resource that can help provide a situational awareness for the first responders, but also a damage assessment for not only first responders, but for the public as well. So we continue to learn. We work with teams. These are coordinated, careful efforts, working through the bureaucracy of TFRs and all that type of different stuff. But thank you for including us in this conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Your response dovetails perfectly with our next question. So the 2020 wildfire season was obviously unprecedented for many of the reasons that you mentioned, and more in the collection of responses to our first question. Part of being able to execute using drones really is founded in policies and procedures that will allow you to use them. So my question is, have current and or proposed policies and procedures affected the use of drones in 2020? And what do you see on the horizon for 2021 and beyond?
I'd like to start with that one. So I'm fortunate enough to be the vice chair for the UAS working group for FireScope. And for people who aren't aware, FireScope is it's a recommendations and technical assistance group to the Office of Emergency Services. So basically in California, master mutual aid program up and down the state. Every summer when you see all those different engines moving up and down the state to go to these large incidents, which aren't just fires, it's an all risk process. All the basic policies, procedures, training recommendations, nuts and bolts of what it takes to get people qualified and certified to be where they are probably came out of FireScope at some point. FireScope's been around since the 70s, and it basically writes the statewide best practices. And then that information goes to state fire training. State fire training builds out classes or adopts classes that make the system work, and then that trickles down to all the local agencies throughout the state. Their folks take the classes, get their certifications, qualifications, become available, and then through the Office of Emergency Services, when there's a major incident, those resources are deployable. California does it better than anybody else in the country. There's no doubt about that. They've been doing it for a long time, and FireScope is a big part of that. The biggest thing that we've seen, quite honestly, is that the Fed has done a fairly good job honestly, of building a UAS qualification program through Fed Forestry. Now, it's specific to wildland. It's not all risk, which is what Cal OES really handles, is all risk. But it's a good starting point, and the state agreed that that would be the best stance to take, is to follow the Fed's lead and use some of the Fed's classes to qualify our folks to make them deployable across the state. Well, due to politics, and then secondarily due to COVID, in no small part, those classes got put on freeze. And as a result of those classes being frozen at the federal level, we were unable to adopt them at the state level and bring them into the state system. So basically what that means is the entire state program has frozen because of that. There's been effectively no advancement in getting state qualifications built, certifications built, because of the policies that have been put in place, and then of course because of COVID at the federal level. So really our hope is that that gets opened back up, so that the state of California is able to find reciprocity with the classes from the Fed and build a program that is consistent with the statewide programs that we build here. To this date, pretty much all the UAS operations that have been run as individual agencies or as small group agencies. At least on OES Fireside, there hasn't been, to my knowledge, an OES Fireside request number produced to send a UAS pilot out. And I can speak with some authority on that because the title of UAS pilot doesn't exist in the state's curricular or the state's vernacular yet within the resource ordering system. So while there's been some great work that has been done, and Chief Madigan has done a phenomenal job in the Bay Area with supporting fire operations, it's really quite sad that we're several years into this and we still are not in a position where we can qualify operators up and down the state to be deployable as individual or grouped resources to go do what his folks are doing already. So it's a frustration point, to be sure, and it's something that we're working through. So the hope is that as we see cresting into 2021 and hopefully things getting a small sense of normalcy or starting to get back to that, we're able to see those classes open up, adopt those classes, and then start to move them into the curriculum. And of course, the challenge to that is nothing happens fast when you do it at the state level. So even if all that opens up today, it's questionable as to how fast we can get it implemented appropriately, get trainers trained to then teach the classes through state fire training, to get operators trained to then develop out that system. And that's really been the goal that we've been working on for the last 2 years. And we were unfortunately close at the beginning of 2020, and then kind of a couple of big boards fell in our way. So that's where we've been at that level. That's probably more of a global issue or a state issue rather than a local issue. But it definitely has affected our ability. Our agency in particular, and most agencies in the area, we won't send people out on managed incidents without a resource request number. And since there's no title to request under specifically for UAS pilot, you can't get a request order number to send people out. They can go out under a different title, but it's kind of not the same, and there's kind of not the qualifications. And in dealing with the aviation subcommittee to fire scope, those folks really want to know that everybody is trained and qualified that's going out on a large incident, because they're flying helicopters and fixed wing aircraft in the same general airspace, and you know, quite honestly, their butts are on the line. They're the ones up in manned aircraft, and the last thing they want is somebody who, you know, yeah, they're good enough to go fly a UAS in their airspace and make a mistake. So I'm sure Chief Madigan will speak to the TFR, negotiating the TFRs and dealing with manned aircraft, but it's a big challenge, and it's something that at the state level we're really looking to reinforce and solidify in a partnership with manned aviation. So that's where we hope to go in 2021.
Chief Madigan and then Chief McNeil, could the two of you add to that, those comments in that order?
Yeah, I'll just say briefly, I understand what, you know, the captain is saying. You know, our resource requests to all these fires, and it's been virtually to almost all of the significant fires within our region, has come through the Office of Emergency Services, and it's generally a request from the sheriff of the county asking for certain things to be done. And what the captain's saying makes sense. If there's a standardized training program, and you know the challenges we had, the first fire that we were asked to go to was in Sonoma in 2017, and there's a TFR in place, a temporary flight restriction in place. So the air boss, you know, owns that airspace, for lack of a better term, for a very good reason, right? The safe integration of unmanned aircraft with manned aircraft, that's like the #1 priority, because we don't ever want to see a bad outcome. And we work with manned aircraft all the time on, you know, smaller incidents within our own jurisdiction. We work with our helicopter pilots and our airplane pilots, and they deconflict the airspace. But either way, the first incident when we spoke with the air boss, you know, hey, we'd like to fly these drones in an area where you're not working. The response was, that's a hard no. I never heard the term hard no before. I heard a no, but it was right to hard no. And so the sheriff of the county said, look, you know, we're trying to send search and rescue folks out to look for people who are presumed to have perished in this fire, and we'd really like you to clear these locations where there's a high probability that people could be before we send in dogs and search and rescue teams and things like that. And the answer was no. And so ultimately we talked with the air boss himself and explained, you know, what we were trying to accomplish, and the reason why, and how we could do it in a safe manner. And so then it went to from a hard no to a no. And then we continued we sent up a representative from our sheriff's office who is a certified flight instructor in rotorcraft, to explain the safe manner in which we would do it. And from there it went to, okay, let's do it, let's try it, and we have to do it in a safe manner. And so over the past 4 years or so, it's gotten a lot easier to fly UAS within a TFR in a careful, coordinated, thoughtful manner, to the point now where the air boss will embed a representative from CAL FIRE's air ops into the UAS team management. So there's careful and thoughtful coordination. But you know, this is kind of, you know, one-offs that we're doing. This needs to be standardized throughout the state of California. So when there's a disaster, fire agencies and these teams of folks with knowledge can bring to bear a resource that's useful in a dangerous situation.
Absolutely. Chief Mcneil, please.
Absolutely, and I can definitely build on both statements or responses from the federal aspect. I sit on the International Association of Fire Chiefs Wildland Fire Policy Committee, and then from that been volunteered and was selected to sit on the NWCG UAS subcommittee. And I can speak to what's going on at the Fed level, which you know, Captain Gifford referred to as being mirrored down at the state level. And I absolutely think that's the most appropriate way. And to his point, it is wildland centric, and the challenge that state of California has under some guidance from FireScope and the California Wildland Fire Coordination Group is to bring that into the all risk arena, and to embrace the certification and qualification systems, but tailor that to the specific mission profiles that the state of California seems to generate on a routine basis. And from the Fed side at the UAS level, they're already working with multiple platforms and very wildland fire centric, but that's their mission, right? That is their task at hand. And I think there is significant ground to gain once this pause from the COVID situation, to bring that training and standards down to a California specific. And once that is implemented into the California Incident Command and Certification System, that drives the resource request numbers. And now you start to see a very integrated deployment model with trust in the certifications. And now you see assets moving across the state. And when that door opens, now you see the opportunity for agencies that are at the forefront of utilization of this technology, being able to get folks out, get them deployed, get ink in the task books, get training, and we have to work through that policy piece to get to that state where we are moving resources up and down in support. And as we get those deployment cases successful, we get those, the number of missions that we successfully deploy the asset, successfully achieve the mission goals, now trust starts to build in the technology. And I see that as the biggest piece on all levels, not just federal, but state level as well, nationwide. This trust in that this is a managed asset flying in conflicted airspace, no different than how we fly now with managed aircraft in a TFR, in a flight area for fixed wing rotorcraft. And the air attack group supervisor knows how to manage those assets, and we do that. So the challenge, the heavy lift, is in the off season prior to the 2021 season, is if we can get that certification system tuned in and dialed to the California all risk environment. Again, the Fed documents are out there, and it's very specific to their profile. They type the aircraft, the capabilities and limitations of each aircraft is there. Really, I think it gets down to, we need to drill down on the pilot specific training, and that has to be documented, and that trust factor has to be elevated for more deployments in the 21 season.
Absolutely. This is this conversation about education within the aviation community, no matter what sector of it, has been, I think, a challenge in the story of the integration of drones for all different uses. Just on this thread of working together, collaboration, what needs to change going forward? What more can be done around education, so that, and I'd love for you to talk, about the role that drones are currently playing in wildfire response and prevention, but what more kind of education needs to be done to build that trust, and especially talk a little bit about how drones are being used in active wildfire and post-wildfire recovery efforts, all the success so far. How are you using that to educate your colleagues in state and federal government? And also, how are you fostering trust among the public so that they are more apt to see drone use to fight wildfires? So I'm going to start with Captain Gifford and let you go from here, if that's all right.
Okay. Well, speaking to the public perception portion of it, we've been very fortunate in our area that that's just never been an issue. And I don't want to pick on Tom, but fire gets away with stuff that law doesn't, just by virtue of fire versus law. And it's not so much getting away, but it's certainly that we're looked at differently than law enforcement is. And I feel bad for the law enforcement folks who are fighting the good fight and trying to get stuff done and getting shut down just by virtue of the fact that it's law enforcement. And certainly way worse in the Bay Area than it is out here in Sacramento. But we were very fortunate to have great public support from the beginning for both law and fire, to be honest with you. Our law agencies that, did I drop out? Is that back?
You're back, sorta.
Hello. You guys hear me? Anyone?
Yep.
I can hear you.
Yep, we can hear you.
Am I back? All right. Technology, gotta love it. Okay. So our law enforcement agencies actually saw really good support when they started programs here, and I know that's not always been the case in the Bay Area. So I think, unfortunately, some of it's regional. But one of the positive things that we did see over time was that the news agencies really liked it. The news agencies wanted to come out and see when we were flying and see the mission profiles we were flying, in no small part because it's good footage. It's a different view that the public likes to see, and so they want to take advantage of that. And so we forged some fairly tight bonds with our media agencies out here, both law and fire agencies forming bonds with the media. And we were fortunate to have them pick that up. And I feel like that's really gone a long way to seeing the public now sees UAV use in this area as just routine. It's not something that's surprising to them. And I think as we continue to go forward, especially in a state like California, with technology being what it is, that will become more of a norm. And I hope that that's a norm for all public safety agencies, and it makes it easier for all of us. So that educational component, I feel like, is being reached. I think that internally, in dealing with manned aviation, because we fly opposite our manned aviation assets and we fly opposite law enforcement's manned aviation assets in this area. But that's a big deal at the state level.
Can't hear you, Ryan.
And that was one of the discussions that we had early with CAL FIRE's air bosses was, what do you, is that back?
It's
okay. We need to build trust within the manned aviation asset world as well, so that they know what we're looking at. Yeah. Somebody else pick it up.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
When do you guys want to go?
Hello?
This is dropping out.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on what the captain was saying. I think that there's a lot of beneficial use cases that are publicly available now that people can that the public can see, that lawmakers can see, that other agencies can see, and we can learn from each other and build upon each other. So I think sort of the proof is in the pudding, right? You look at the work that's been done by public safety and the use of UAS, just in terms of the damage assessment, or the thermal imaging, the mapping, the development of the sort of common operating picture helped by, with the use of UAS. So I think that I think people can build upon what's already been done. And then I think one important piece is, when we talk, initially when we first got into this, we went and talked all over the nation and the world, and we really tried to, the manned aviators, they didn't initially like UAS technology, like at all, because they felt it was infringing upon the really important work that they do in the air, right? And so I think it's important to say that, these tools, this UAS technology used in a thoughtful and coordinated manner, really they enhance the work that our folks in the air are doing. And I'll use an example of a situation we had recently where, and this is a police situation. So, but there was a situation where we thought someone had been taken hostage in a residence. Well, the helicopter got there first. The helicopter was first on scene, providing a situational awareness to the first responders. And those of us who send first responders into harm's way, we have a tremendous responsibility to provide them with the tools and technology to do their job safely, regardless of the bureaucratic nonsense that we got to navigate through, right? That's our job, is to give them the right tools. So the helicopter gets there. Well, then the folks with the UAS get there, and they take over that scene from the helicopter, and the helicopter can move on to the next thing. So, I think people are doing this stuff on a regular basis. We need to point to the beneficial uses. We need to work through the bureaucratic stuff to make this, to allow agencies who send their people into harm's way to leverage this technology so they can keep their first responders safe and also keep the public safe.
Yeah, those are great examples.
Just
I love that you said, talking about enhancing the work, UAS can enhance the work. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just to tie in with what Chief Madigan said, that was our initial dialogue with CAL FIRE's air operations was, no, you're in the way. And we kind of reset and started talking about what jobs don't your helicopter pilots like? and it comes down to like damage assessment, cold line trailing, stuff like that. And I said, these are all perfect jobs for UAS. So you can cut your big, expensive, very, very necessary pieces of equipment loose to go do the really important jobs that they're there for. And that has been a universal thing in any aviation group that I've spoken to, manned aviation group, is nobody's trying to take your job, and we certainly don't want to be in your way. But there's a lot of stuff that can be done that is really your ancillary duty that you don't want to do, or that's tying you up because it is important, but it's not the best use of that resource. So I think that has really changed a lot of minds in the manned aviation community to be seen more as a partnership and as a proper delegation of equipment for resource for mission type, more than just a, hey, there's an infringement. And it's an education piece like anything else. And I get it, because they're the ones flying the manned aircraft, and that's a big scary deal. Get slammed into by a piece of plastic at 100 miles an hour is a bad day.
Both of you absolutely nailed what I would like to echo, which is some of the key pieces of education, not just internal but external, not just agency but also public. The word tool, the word asset, the word, even something as simple as not using the term drone versus using terms like UAS or UAV, I found very effective in explaining that this is an asset, no different than staffed aircraft, no different than any other types of tools that we use to manage the risk at any given incident-driven variable situation. So when you start saying that this is a tool to manage risk, how do I manage risk with the tool? I use it for situational awareness, to make better decisions, to keep the responders safer, to prioritize missions for the higher valued assets or the more complex assets. All of those things are key to allowing not just the public but other agencies to understand that this is an augmentation, this is a bolstering, this is a resource that adds to the toolbox. It is not something that will ever replace staffed aircraft, but like Captain Gifford said, what are some of the things that I can use for the UAV realm, for missions, to take that risk off of staffed aircraft? Perfect example, wildland fire perimeter mapping, flying low and slow with the GPS. Why are we exposing that flight crew, that aircraft, that incident to that type of mission profile when it's a perfect use, non-priority mission for UAV? It's managing risk. And I love the idea of the public embracing it and saying, look, we as constituents see emerging technology as a path forward to help us out. It is one way out. It is not the catch-all. It's not the magic pill. But we have this technology. Let's use it to increase our ability to make wise decisions, resource allocation on the highest priority sections, and keep our responders safe. And it's a tool, it's an asset, it's not a toy, right? That's the thing I get the most when we're doing public education pieces, demonstrations. It's getting people to change their perspective from toy to tool. Right, and that this is not something that we're just flying around haphazardly. This is a very diligent and planned use of a resource under very thoughtful and specific mission profiling. And once people get their head around that, which isn't hard to do, it's pretty quick and easy explanation. There's a very strong embracement of it, and I think that support from not just internal but the external will help drive our progress forward.
I just wanted to add just one quick thing, because I know we're running short time, but I think the future is very exciting as well, right? When we start talking about beyond visual line of sight, when we talk about remote ID and even altitude airspace waivers, I think that's going to make this tool even more useful for really all of public safety, not just for fire, but for all of public safety.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and I do think that one of the things that we continue to see, that level of advancement is occurring because there is a cooperation between agencies. One of the best things that we've done in the Sacramento area is form the regional UAV operators group. It's about 30 law and fire agencies from the greater Sacramento area. And the benefit is both internal and external, in that when an agency boss wants to know why they should do something, there's a fallback position of, we have a group, the group came up with this consensus, it's a best practice, we're supporting it as a group. The same thing works with the public, though. When there's a public request for information on why did this occur, the chief officer isn't stuck with, well, because we have a program and we did it. But it's not just a program, it's a program built in a regional concept with regional training goals and regional support. And as we see that continue to grow beyond regions and in the state, that's really that support piece that I feel like takes us to the next level and is able to get us some of the things we're talking about, like larger format aircraft, higher altitude, beyond visual line of sight. And that stuff's coming. It's already here. We hold a beyond visual line of sight, tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver for our agency now. And I know that there are other agencies that do as well. And that was something that was completely unheard of just a couple years ago. And now it's a thing. So, and that's not in any small part, because there are regional groups and there are regional cooperation. And so as we see that continue, I think we'll see continued wins at a bigger and bigger level.
Great. Oh, this is such an important part of the discussion, and I think the innovation that is being done by all of you and in your departments and with your colleagues is really helping to lead the way with public acceptance and further integration of drones here in the U.S. Obviously, part of building your program is your fleet and the investment in your drone fleet. And over this past year, especially, we've seen some attempts at restrictions around foreign-made drones. What is that impact on your departments and on your programs? And how do you see this playing out in the future? Who would like to take this first?
I'll jump in. I think the federal restrictions don't necessarily filter down to the local agency. So we've been able to keep moving forward with fleet management. One of the positives of this kind of scrutiny is that it allows additional development to happen for other manufacturer of UAVs to come into the field and to begin to implement different solutions to different problems. So for us, we have not been hampered by the restrictions federal. I don't believe that it's a security risk to the missions that we're flying from the fire side specifically. Obviously, if we're doing something that is sensitive, then we exercise diligence and provide security to that mission data that is captured during those flights. And from the law enforcement side, I know the same thing is happening, right? Very specific attention is being paid to where are we flying, what is our mission, what are we capturing, what are we doing with that data. So from us locally, we continue to be able to expand into this realm of UAV immersion, and we are looking at all across the board at different platforms. And I think that as different feature sets come out, as different packages come out, as different airframes come out, we will begin to diversify and have a very specific aircraft to a specific mission. And that's where we get to the most efficient and the safest, right? We're not flying the larger aircraft on stuff that a smaller aircraft can handle, and vice versa.
I would echo some of those comments and say that if there's a positive that comes out from the scrutiny of overseas equipment, it's that it should be strengthening everything. It should be strengthening domestic equipment as well as foreign equipment, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? I mean, we're in public safety. There's a responsibility, absolutely, for what we're doing, how we're doing it, the information that's gathered. And so while the scrutiny may or may not be political, but the fact of the matter is that it should be putting pressure, and I believe it is putting pressure from the manufacturers I speak with. We're fortunate to get a lot of that input and output from manufacturers as they build because of our group. But I think that that's good pressure. I really do. I think it's forcing them to step up to the plate. It's forcing them to come up with innovative and positive solutions, and it's forcing them to look beyond the toy sector, look beyond just building something that will fly. One of my constant complaints to third-party, specifically software manufacturers, is you're not building something that will deal with everything, and that's what public safety needs. They need packages that can deal with all their aircraft, all their pilots, all their data flow, all of their record keeping, because that's what's expected of us. And I think that there's a lot of manufacturers out there, private manufacturers, developers, who don't really understand that. They don't understand the depth to which our normal day-to-day paperwork is more than what most people see in a year for just going to a fire or going to a homicide call or whatever it may be. Like, there's reams of paperwork that get done digitally usually, but that's normal for us. So the idea that we want all of our information properly processed, properly stored, and properly made available is a big part of how I see the future of UAS going. And if people want to win, they need to be able to integrate all those pieces. I want software that can deal with all points of hardware. I want hardware that can integrate with all my software points, and I want all that stuff put together in a package system that works and is transferable. So I'm hoping that that's what we're seeing with this pressure, is that we're seeing more innovative, more detailed, and more depth of design from both the hardware and the software manufacturers. So I choose to look at the glass half full and say we're going to have positives from that. So that's what I'm hoping happens.
I agree with what they both said.
Great. Thank you for that concise answer. Perfect. Get an A+ on that. My next question is, can you talk just a little bit about the lessons learned from this wildfire season and what you're planning to carry over into next year, and what you're looking forward to in innovation next year and beyond, especially with drone use?
I think that the biggest thing that we saw this year, both locally and regionally, was the transition from a pilot with an aircraft gathering information with his or her own eyes and relaying that information, and an absolute expectation and necessity of having full streaming video and information movement to incident command and beyond as a normal piece. It's one of the things that we've really stressed with the way we're building out our deployment vehicle and the software packages we use. And so I think when we first started doing stuff, and it doesn't really matter if it's wildland or all risk type kind of calls, it was mostly a pilot gathering information, that pilot relaying information. And as command has seen that information firsthand, they want it firsthand. And we've flown with law enforcement a lot on law enforcement calls, and they want to see it. We've flown with fire a lot, and they want to see it. So for us, that's been a software only solution. No hardware pieces, no additional batteries, no additional cables, no additional this, no additional that, because you're trying to keep a fast, compact package moving out the door. And that's what I see going forward, is that at some point there's going to be a command center with 20 screens up, and each one of them is going to have a UAV shot on them that's going to be translating that information, and somebody's going to push a button and send that information down to the ground folks who are going to look at it and take what they need from it. So that's what I've seen this year, is that transition to where's the video, show me the video, bring up the video remotely, as opposed to that local, hey, I'm standing right next to you, tell me what you see, or get on the radio and tell me what you see.
Absolutely correct, and I agree 100%. And what specific lessons that we have seen over the last couple of years, this season just passing being one of them, is connectivity in remote areas is a huge piece. So we have the resources that can fly the missions. We have the software and hardware that can capture the data. We've got to get it real time, to get that situational awareness to real time to the decision makers. There's this connectivity piece in remote locations, and as we see these incidents grow in size at the exponential rate we've witnessed in the last few years, we are definitely going to be impacting the communication infrastructure. And so we need resiliency in the UAV side. And what Captain Gifford speaks to as the deployment vehicle, that will bring its communication systems with it, right? To be able to fill that gap when the local infrastructure for comms and data sharing has been compromised. And that to me is one of the biggest pushes we need to, as a community, not just UAV community, but public safety community, is lean back on the cell data providers to build out that Envision network and give us that connectivity in remote locations, and to bridge that gap with local resources we can deploy on a very short notice, and give us that cone of coverage. Integrating it into aerial platforms as part of it, and that once we get to that coverage piece, then just Captain Gifford said, we will have real-time situational awareness with no latency whatsoever, right into the incident command post, and decisions made based on that real-time information, asset allocation, risk management, all those benefits that this resource provides.
And then just, I mean, I guess this is from a not just a public safety standpoint, not necessarily fully understanding all the intricacies of what the firefighters are dealing with. But one thing that I've seen over the past 4 years is, we pull together, a task force of UAV operators. It sure be good for as Captain Gifford said, everyone have a standardized training, that we know when we're bringing in all these folks from different agencies that they've all been trained and understand these systems and the airspace restrictions, and so they can sort of integrate as one team. And then I will say the other thing we've learned in terms of the fires, as you start looking at beyond visual line of sight in the future, is quadcopters, they're pretty handy, but they're not super handy for large areas, right? When we start talking about beyond visual line of sight and fixed wing UAS, I think that is going to bring that's going to really take it to the next level, because the quadcopters can cover a decent amount of area, but nothing like a fixed wing that you're granted some beyond visual line of sight waiver. And so I think that's exciting for the future.
Well, we're going to very much be looking at a much more a flight column looking much more like the military, right? With lower operating aircraft, mid-range operating aircraft, high cap aircraft. And that some of them will be manned, some will be unmanned. And we're fortunate that we have something to draw from in that regard, right? We're not rebuilding the wheel, but that's exactly what's going to happen. And there will be different formats that are utilized. It's already happening, right? Whether the public knows it or not, there's already high cap aircraft flying, doing remote sensing over these large incidents that are way beyond where the attack aircraft are working. So we'll see more of that, and it'll be, I think, at a lower altitude and with smaller aircraft with more capability. So we're not talking about $1 million, government UAVs. We're talking about local agency fixed wing aircraft that can work above the cap and stuff like that. I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
Terrific. Well, let me turn, we have a few minutes for some audience questions. And I think this question goes perfectly with your last answer, Captain Gifford. What are the outstanding challenges for managing congested firefighting airspace?
I think in my dealings with CAL FIRE, the biggest thing that comes up is a true understanding of how the fire airspace works. Pilots understand it intrinsically because they're taught it. One of the things that CAL FIRE has expressed vehemently is that they want a portion of a class or a class dealing specifically with the fire airspace, because UAV operators who may be great at moving an aircraft around and using their technology, they're not trained as traditional pilots. They don't have all the hours spent in a cockpit speaking that language. And if you can't understand what's going on in the fire traffic area, it's akin to not being able to speak the language and trying to drive a car through a congested area with a lot of signs, and you can't read the language. You can drive the car, but I can't tell what these signs say, what I'm supposed to do, what I'm not supposed to do. and that's something that has to be resolved. I think remote ID is one of those pieces that will come into play at some point. I'm not confident in that that's going to be soon, or that that's going to be as easy as people want it to be. I got to sit on the NASA working group for that, and that was phenomenal. There's a lot of steps that have to go into making that work. But I think that understanding that fire traffic area, speaking the same language, and understanding what everybody is doing is the biggest, most important piece to deconflicting and managing that airspace.
Anyone else want to add to this question?
I just concur that the complexity, we're very fortunate or unfortunate in the Bay Area. We have, some of the most congested airspace in the world, and our folks have to learn it, understand it, because they're operating UAS routinely very close to the Oakland International Airport, underneath San Francisco's Class Bravo airspace. They got Hayward. They got a lot. There's a lot of moving parts, and I know that the airspace within a TFR is even more complex. So I agree 100%. People have to understand that, and otherwise it could lead to bad outcomes.
Great. Let me go to our next question. What are the titles of the certification training classes that are on the horizon? Who will determine what agencies get that training? And is there a format already in place for the training curriculum?
So within the state of California, we are adopting a majority of the NWCG, National Wildfire Coordinating Group's federal process. To speak to the actual qualifications, there's 4 of them. There's a UASP, which is UAS pilot, UASL, which is a UAS team leader, UASM, which is a UAS manager, and UASD, which is a data specialist. The first 3 are pretty much what they sound like: a pilot, a team leader who would have input and control of a team of pilots. The manager is really on the Fed level, is looked at, if I'm correct, as more of a liaison position with contract UAS and that realm. And then a data specialist is exactly what it sounds like. There's a ton of data that comes out of these aircraft that has to be managed. We have to understand it. Those positions they're in place at the federal level. We're just trying to bring them across to the state level. In reference to the actual classes required, that is still a piece of in flux. That is the issue of getting those federal classes made available within the state, and importantly, the state has to adopt them. So you can't just go out and take a federal class and have it mean anything in the state until state fire training grants or is granted reciprocity with a class or takes reciprocity of a class. It doesn't matter. I've tried several times to travel out to those classes, and A, they're locked up classes, but B, it wouldn't mean anything anyway from the state's perspective. So that's something that has to be adopted and brought in. And the current thinking, roughly, is that there'll be 2 to 3 classes, probably 24-hour to 40-hour classes that will effectively get you into a position to open the task books for those positions. Those positions will be sequential. So you'll need to start as a UASP to become a UASL, to work on becoming a UAS manager. But the way that CICCS and the qualification program in California works on the fire side is very well established. It's just a matter of building that stuff out. In terms of the availability of the classes, that has a ton to do with how quickly the classes are brought online. If it's a very difficult process to bring each individual class into the state fire training curriculum, if there's a lot of back and forth, if there's a lot of rebuilding, if there's a lot of retooling, well, then that class A has to be built. It then has to be attended by a bunch of instructors to get this qualification to teach the class. Then it has to get rolled out and be made available to the state. And in terms of where, when, how many slots, that's a huge variable. I don't believe for a second that it'll be anything that's disqualifying in terms of we're only going to teach the classes to these agencies or these people. I think the bigger challenge will be getting the classes set up, having enough instructors to run the classes, being able to run the classes and have the availability to do that, because anybody who works in fire service in California knows that starting about June, everything goes into a hold for fire season, and we don't open it up again until sometimes November or December. So all the best laid plans through the spring then go put into hold. So the time frames for this build out, unfortunately, long. Some of my colleagues in Virescope have commented once or twice that I'm awful pushy with trying to get this stuff done, but I recognize that just getting it on the docket means maybe in 18 months you can use it. So hopefully that answers that question. There are specific titles, there are specific classes as of yet unnamed within the state. And then the goal is to use the task book process that's already in place for training and deployment. And as a new program, much like when we started doing REMS teams and other fireline medic teams and other individual or small group resources for fires, there's a learning curve and there's a processing curve to get those people trained and get them signed off. And what does that look like? And then of course there has to be acceptance by incident command to say, yeah, we want to bring in those resources. But once that happens, it happens at an exponential rate. Once you start putting UAVs into active incidents, there will be no stopping it. And we've seen that very, very heavily on the law enforcement side, where our law enforcement partners, they're flying multiple times a day, every day. Like that's just a normal thing for them now. The incidents for fire tend to be a build down a little bit different. So our flight schedule is a little bit different, but once it starts, it won't stop. So that's what's there. That's what's on the horizon. The timing will be an issue that has to be as of yet resolved. The all risk portion is another thing, and whether that's dealt with by individual mission typing or a more generic all risk program that gets you started is kind of a yet to be seen thing too.
Great. I'm going to ask one more question, and this is for Chief Madigan, and I'll give you 60 seconds to answer. Were you able to convince the fire boss of safely operating within the TFR zone through geofencing capabilities of the UAS?
So in each and every instance, in each and every fire that we've responded to over the past, since going back to the fires in Sonoma, which I believe were 2017, the Air Boss has granted us approval to fly within their TFR. So the answer is yes. So we didn't geo. We had to get we use some DJI products, so we had to get the I can't remember the term of it, but basically we had to get granted to be able to fly through DJI too, right? We had to get the unlock. We had to get it on. TFR was locked. We had to get that unlocked in many situations. We've since resolved that, but yes, each and every time. Now what CAL FIRE does is they'll embed someone who's in direct communication with the Air Boss as part of the management structure of the UAS team. We'll have a manager there. We generally bring in 5, 6, 7 teams from all around the Bay Area, and we work in coordination with CAL FIRE in a coordinated manner. So the answer is yes.
Great. Before I wrap this up, any final comments from our panelists? I'll give you a few seconds each if you'd like.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to participate, and please don't let the roadblocks of 2020 stop anybody's progress, anybody's program development, and anybody's vision looking forward for integration of this emergent technology to help us in public safety.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us. And for people who are looking at starting programs or advancing their programs, reach out to your neighbors. Talk to the agencies next door to you and ask them what they're doing. You'll be amazed at what you'll find out. It's everywhere, whether you know it or not. It's next to you, so use that to your advantage.
I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity, and I just encourage agencies that don't have UAS programs, they can help your folks do their job in a safer manner. So please look please start UAS programs, coordinated, thoughtful UAS programs. Thank you.
Thoughtful.
Well, I'd just like to thank you all so much for this robust discussion. I think we could probably go on for another hour. But again, it's Chief Mcneil, Chief Madigan, Captain Gifford, thank you all so much for your invaluable insights and your time. I know how busy you all are. Our audience, I'm sure, took a lot away from this discussion. For the audience, a note that a recording of today's webinar is going to be emailed out to all of you, and it will also be available on the DJI website. So thank you all again so much. Happy holidays, be safe, and hopefully we'll be able to continue this discussion in person next year. So thank you all again. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.